My name is Mike Espy, former Secretary of Agriculture, proud to be a member of the One Country Project Board of Directors. I'm joining you today from Jackson, Mississippi, the heart of the rural South, where, unfortunately, the issues of farmer discrimination, heir property issues, and land loss are still very, very prevalent. I'm familiar with these issues in my law practice here because I was one of the lawyers for the Pickford lawsuit. All of these issues were impacted. So I'm really looking forward to the discussion today and really looking forward to talking with our keynote speaker, Mr. Eternal Polk, who will show a short film that he created after I introduce him. Mr. Eternal Polk is a two-time Emmy Nominated director, writer, and segment producer with over 20 years of directing short and long-form projects, including documentaries, music videos, branded content, and commercials. His work has been featured on HBO, Fox, ESPN, ABC, BET, VH1, and MTV, and I'm sure many, many more, Eternal. The film is called Gaining Ground. And then after I turn to you, Eternal, for your opening comments, you're going to introduce the film and we'll show the audience a short clip, after which we'll have a discussion. Thank you. Eternal Polk.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that introduction. And thank you for having me and inviting me to be a part of the Rural Progress Summit. I believe that this work is essential for us all to reconnect with each other through the land, that we connect to and appreciate the land. The late Charles Sherrod, rest in peace, shared with his wife, Shirley Sherrod, whom I'm sure some of you know, this one particular phrase: all power comes from the land and the land comes from God. From food to clothing to housing, every aspect of our lives is affected from what comes from the land. And this is a power. To connect with the land spiritually is another power. To profit from the land financially is yet another form of power. And to heal from the land is probably the most important power we as human beings possess. When we disconnect from the land, whether that's by force of choice, we are disconnected from our God-given power to lift, support, feed, uphold, protect, and provide for ourselves and others. We are disconnected from the source of our healing. As I traveled through Georgia, Texas, Alabama, North Carolina, New York, and South Carolina, Louisiana, and Arkansas for this film, I met great people, just good, salt-of-the-earth people, and families committed to farming and land stewardship and preserving their legacy. I learned how integral farming and land stewardship is to our collective well-being. Whether you turned an abandoned lot in the Bronx into an urban farm, or acquired a former plantation and turned it into a place of healing, teaching, and restoration, or you have acres of land in your family for decades, I learned that it is hard, isolating work, and often not regarded in society as it should be. I learned how critical farming is, and unfortunately, I learned how heart-wrenching it was for people to lose their land, their power. This is why I'm eager to share and have the conversation about my film, Gaining Ground, the fight for Black land, and participate in this Rural Progress Summit and support the goals of reconnecting to the land and honoring the work that farmers do and acknowledging what they mean to our country. And so without further ado, this is a clip of the film.
When we look at 1920, there were 16 million acres of land, and present day, you look at there's only 2 million acres of Black-owned land in the country. That's 14 million acres of land that has just disappeared from the Black agricultural community.
Black farmland lost in that 75-year period or so was worth $326 billion.
Think about all of the wealth that has been extracted from these families.
Land was something that freed us and offered opportunity for us and our children to have something of our very own, to enjoy something that would last for generations.
Black people need space. They understand the legacy.
When we got here, we didn't have nothing. Every time we gained something, there's been a reaction to it.
Where do you go when you lose your land? This is something you put everything you had, and in spite of everything you did, it's gone.
I would hear people talking about going back to their land.
I thought, how can we engage in a way that actually makes a difference? So let's engage the Thurgood Marshall College Fund to engage Black law schools to get interns, to then go work for the Federation of Southern Cooperatives, helping Black folks keep title to the land that they have or get good title.
I've heard the stories throughout the years, the things that my family had overcome, how we lost land. I want to invest the same time that I did in getting my education and passing it on to my kids one day.
We need to shift this idea about what it means even to have our hands in the soil.
This represents history. This is a part of family reunions. This land represents all that's good about our family.
Land represents generational wealth. When you can have that land and pass it on to your children, you're creating a reciprocating type of monetary payment to that family. But if you don't have that land structured right, you will not benefit from it.
Colonel?
Yes,
All right, can you hear me?
I can hear you fine.
I recognize everyone in that film. Shirley Sherrod and what's our friend's name with the farms in North Carolina, Arkansas?
PJ Haney.
PJ Haney, yeah.
Yes.
PJ Haney and his father.
Yes.
PJ is a leading Black farmer, and you know there's a Black Farmer Coalition, an assembly of the largest Black farmers in the United States, and PJ was the president of that organization.
Yeah.
And PJ and his cohorts are now selling mostly soybeans and rice
Yes.
to countries in Africa.
Rice. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yes, I talked to him a lot. Well, and Shirley Sherrod and her recently deceased husband have done great work with their center in Epps, Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
So it's all about land loss and mitigating the land loss that we are experiencing. So I want to turn to you right now to see how can we do more to make sure that we can hold on to those properties. And I'll say this, in my experience with the Pickford lawsuit, and that was the lawsuit, I was involved in the Pickford 2 lawsuit with the recovery of $1.2 billion from the USDA. They consented to the fact that they had discriminated against Black farmers. And we got through the first iteration of the $50,000 distributions, and then we failed to the second tranche, which went to the children of the deceased Black farmers. And that's when we ran into all kinds of trouble. A recorded of deeds, dissension within the families, land loss issues. And so I'm a little bit familiar with that. But what would you do? What would you recommend to make sure that we could continue the ownership and the legacy ownership in the succeeding generations?
Well, first, I want to tell people you can go to the website, gaininggroundthefilm.com, and it has the trailer as well as excerpts about very specific parts of the conversation that we're having. And to answer your question, on that site, there are also links to the organizations that are helping. The LEAP Coalition, which was founded by John Deere. The Thurgood Marshall College Fund is part of that coalition, as well as the Center for Heirs Property Preservation in South Carolina. And the Federation of Southern Cooperatives is a part of that coalition, that ecosystem that is there to help any landowner who is experiencing heirs property issues similar to that.
In my notes, it talks about a LEAP coalition. Tell me about that and how you became involved with the LEAP coalition.
Well, the LEAP coalition is an effort by John Deere to address the inequities in land ownership. LEAP stands for Legislate, Educate, and educate, awareness, and production systems. So what they imagined was there were people in this space who were dealing with heirs property issues, which is the leading cause for Black land loss in America. And to address that, they went to organizations that were already doing the work, such as Federation of Southern Cooperatives, and then they matched them with the Thurgood Marshall College Fund to provide internships, to provide a paid lawyer to help handle some of the issues with heirs property, which includes sometimes it's family mediation, getting all your family on board to do the necessary paperwork to be able to clear your title, which is the real part of it, getting a clear title. Right. And so how I got involved with this was a former colleague of mine, Denise Hurst Green, who is a producer with Al Roker Entertainment, reached out to me, and we spoke about this film right when they were still in the process of trying to figure out who was going to come on board and how the project was going to kind of come together. And I kept putting the bug in her ear, like, man, that'd be a great project to direct. I would love to direct a project like that. And a couple months later, she called me up and she said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Nothing." She says, "Well, how do you feel about directing that film about Black farmers?" I was like, "Yes." And then I jumped on board, and it's been a wonderful experience with the people and John Deere, and of course, Al Roker Entertainment.
There are a lot of moving stories in the film. So can you recount a story that you find to be the most moving for you? One that really resonated with your spirit that you can recount to the listeners?
Wow.
Oh, there are many.
There are, and I'm trying to sort through them and see. I mean, Shirley Sherrod. I said that if we had to take everybody out of this film and we could only interview one person, it would be Shirley Sherrod. And I think she is worthy. The work she's done in the civil rights movement and the work she's done in agriculture is like worthy of that kind of attention and honor. But she told us about this, and then we did some research and we found an old film with Charles, with her husband, and she has multiple chapters of a story, so it's hard for me to really kind of pick one. But I think
she does. One of those chapters, she was actually an official with USDA.
Yes.
And had an issue there, and in principle, she left the organization. So,
well, I think if I want to tell a story that has sort of a very interesting twist,
yes,
and is uplifting all at the same time, it is her acquisition of the current land that she is on right now,
yes,
in new communities, which they own, Resora, which was a former plantation, and it was a plantation that was held by one of the largest slave owners in Georgia. It's 1,600 acres, now 85-acre lake. It's a beautiful place. And the story how they came across this property and how someone suggested that they do it, and someone was like, hey, forget what they're asking, just submit an offer. And they wound up getting this property. And this is, when you say the twist, they lost their property in the late 60s, or 70s, I think, where where they weren't allowed to leverage the property or the equipment they had to pay for the land. So they lost the land for a very, very, small amount. And then Shirley was still doing this work. And then years later, they were able to acquire a former plantation. I think that is one of those plot twists that you just can't imagine what happening in your life. And when you see someone tell that story, you're just really happy that things came back to them in a positive way. And they're doing great work there in terms of teaching other people different farming techniques. They have different crops on the land. They do agri-tours so people can come and see, what they're doing, what they're creating. So it's a beautiful place. I plan on going there and hopefully having a writer's retreat.
Well, it's a great property. I'm familiar with the property and how it was actually acquired, with Shirley Sherrod and the Federation of Southern Cooperatives. Shirley and Charles were black farmer applicants in the Pickford lawsuit. They had two tracks, track A and track B. Track B was the one I was involved in. It was more of $50,000
Right.
recipients, but track A, pretty much unlimited. And Shirley and Charles received a great recovery in the track A process, and that allowed them to purchase the land that you're speaking about.
And I might add that now that you bring that up, that they actually did also give money to the families that were displaced on the property that they were on, so that they could have some kind of recompense for losing the place that they were living at the time. So they did that as well.
This just doesn't happen in the 5 states of the South, the rural South. Alabama, Arkansas, Mississippi, Louisiana, and Georgia. It's all over the country. I helped to represent a medical doctor in Albany, New York, whose father was a dentist, back in the 1940s. And he was a successful farmer until he had a year that was a financial problem for him. And he went to the local, what was then called the farmer's home and the ASC offices of USDA. And because of his race, they did not see fit to approve a loan from him, even though he had a historic record of successful farming. And so his son, who was a successful medical doctor, and his brother, who's also a physician, and the farm, the dad in Law 6 died, is heir property of that land, actually filed a claim on behalf of that father, and we were successful. So his name is Wes Hicks, and if you ever go beyond the limits of the rural South, if we'll go up to Albany or upstate New York, please call Wes Hicks. He still has his father's land. It's got lakes on it, hunting lodges, and it's beautiful. So please contact Wes Hicks, and you'll get a story.
The interesting thing about what you're saying is that currently, I just read an article. The same tactic that was used with Heirs Property is being used in New York City right now, where brownstone or a home is being left to multiple individuals, and then one individual sells what they recognize as their portion of that ownership, and then they're using the same Heirs Property loophole to force the sale of their home. So it's happening in urban environments too. And Professor Thomas Mitchell, who I'm sure you're aware of, has been doing a lot of work in the legislative arena to sort of close the loopholes. And he mentions this in his book about the growing crisis of this happening in the north and urban environments.
So those of you who would like to ask a question of our guest speaker, please go to the Q&A button and not the chat.
If you have a question, I do have something I wanted to share with you. And
yeah, go ahead,
because
please.
I think what is good for people to know is that there are resources out there. There are people that can help, but this is a very complicated issue in terms of how you untangle it. It's like untangling a necklace that's kind of gotten all tangled up. There's so many little bitty intricate parts of it, and it takes time. And people, the people who would exploit this, they know it takes time, it takes resources, and so I would definitely encourage people to look at the Federation of Southern Cooperatives and Center for Heirs Property, the LEAP Coalition, which is John Deere. All of those things again are on the website for the film. We made with the intention of informing people and giving them and directing them directly to the different options for the resources that they need, and hopefully can spread the message. And I also want to make clear this too. This issue disproportionately affects Black farmers, but it doesn't only affect Black farmers. I want to make that very clear, that there are indigenous folks, Latino, poor whites, who are dealing with the same issue. If you don't have clear title to your land, it is an opportunity for someone or some organization to initiate proceedings if they can, get someone to sell a portion of it. So I don't want people to be misconstrued in the sense that this is some sort of set aside or anything like that. This program helps farmers with heirs property issues, no matter what your background is, where you're from. This is help that's needed. And as I spoke about in my opening remark, I have really come to appreciate the contribution that farmers make and how important agriculture is to, our life. I think the pandemic kind of had really had proven how instrumental and how integral agriculture and the byproduct of the land is, how important it is to our life. And so right after that, I worked on this project and I got to see firsthand the people and what they do and the work that they've put in and the challenges that they've had to deal with. But I've also seen young people engaged in agriculture and different aspects of it. And I learned about, for the first time, I was in a tractor in a wheat field, and I didn't know how sort of electronic the tractor was and how it was connected with satellites and could almost harvest on with precision. These were things that I was, learning along the way, and I was a very curious sort of filmmaker. So that curiosity is what carries on into the film itself. The questions that I asked was really from a person who really didn't know a lot, but I have been someone who's been a clear and strong advocate for reconnecting to the land and appreciating those gifts that the land gives, and particularly for Black folks, because there's the stereotype or stigma that Black people only live in urban environments and they don't want to go into rural environments, and they aren't interested in those things. But I've met a lot of people in that space, and I also understand from my own experience the healing nature of being in those spaces and what it provides you. I just recently moved to North Carolina, and any given week you can find me in the mountains hiking because of and solely from that aspect, that healing aspect, or going to a nature preserve and walking around for 2 or 3 hours, and is very healing. So there's another aspect of this that I always try to convey is it's not only about farming, it's having a place to be and to exist and to feel free and to heal. And I think that's why when the pandemic hit, a lot of people were looking to go into rural spaces.
Very important. I agree with everything you said. In addition to being a member of One Country Project, I'm also on the board of the Farmers Disadvantaged Farmers and Ranchers organization, and it does deal mostly with African American and Hispanic farmers, minority farmers. But I've dealt with this issue of young people not wanting to go into farming. Just what you mentioned earlier, they believe that it's hot, sweaty, very difficult to deal with pests and climate and prices, and that's true. But they don't understand the technological advances that we've seen in production agriculture. Just the tractor that you mentioned, a combine, you get in there, it's got GIS positioning. You don't really have to touch the wheel. GIS determines the furrows and how wide they're going to be. It tells the machine when to plant the seed or when to apply the fertilizer. It's air conditioned inside the cab. Yes. You listen to Drake if you want to. Listen to whatever you like, your music preference. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people think you literally there pushing behind some animal. It's no longer like that. And I wish our students in the land grant colleges, not just HBCUs, but the other land grant colleges understand that it's sort of a different scenario now. It would have to be as arduous.
Well, when I went to Arkansas to talk to PJ Haney, we went to Arkansas Pine Bluff, and they brought, it was a day to recognize students who were in agriculture. So, yes. I saw some of the young people that are in that are involved from all different backgrounds, and I think people have this sort of misconception that, hey, if I got 300 acres right now, I wouldn't know what to do with it. That all I can do is farming. And this is, I just met someone yesterday that was telling me about land that they have in South Carolina. And they said, well, if it's farmable land, you can lease it to the National Black Growers Council. They have farmers that will lease your land and farm it. And all you're doing is collecting the payment from the lease. There's timber involved. Hey, if you knock all the trees down and you make a yoga retreat, I'm pretty sure people will show up. There are different ways to look at land ownership and how land could provide resources for you. And I remember one of the families, the Eli family in Barlow Bend, Alabama. I don't know how many people that's the other thing. I didn't know many of these places before I visited them. Okay. Opelousas, Barlow Bend, Marble, Arkansas. I was all around, and but the the people that I met at Barlow Bend, they had this land in their family for 127 years, and had done fish fries and all kinds of things. They had crops, of course, but recently they discovered they have a fresh water spring on their property. And I told them, I said, look, next time I come to the family reunion, I hope I see some bottled water.
That's right.
There's so many different things, and one of the Eli's told me that one of the cousins found out that you can make about 30 to 40,000 on 1 acre of garlic. Yes. And quit his job and said, I'm gonna start farming because of that. So there are different ways to monetize and capitalize off of the land. And I'm particularly looking at these different ways that are pushing more towards health and wellness and how do we restore ourselves.
Yes. Absolutely. And as you said, you can lease it and you don't have to actively farm it, just lease it to someone else, but you can also enroll it into the USDA conservation program where you don't have to do anything. Right. They pay you not to do anything.
Exactly. I told someone that yesterday. They looked at me shocked. They were like, I can't believe
you're
giving me this information, because we were trying to figure out what to do with our land, and people the elders are passing, and there are more kids that are getting involved, and And so the very things that we're talking about right now, someone yesterday was just like, I'm so happy that I ran.
Yes. And that's a large initiative because it fits now within President Biden's climate change initiative. You know, you're not using fertilizers, you're not, have gas with emissions in the air. So it's something they're really looking to. We do have a question from someone. I'm assuming that they're within this segment of heirs and they want to find out. They want to know what's the first step they should take to reclaim their property.
Oh, if they I'm not sure about the reclamation process.
It only says what is the first step.
Okay.
So
look, I believe, and I'm going to put this disclaimer out there. I am not a lawyer. I don't play one on TV.
I got you. You look like a doctor with that jacket on.
Yeah, you're right. But what I will say is a lot of the information that we provide on the site are the links that you go to the people. Now, unofficially, I would say the first step is to assess what is going on with your family. When I went to the seminar at the Center for Heirs Property, they were having a free wills clinic. But to get into the wills clinic, they needed to know who are your living family members, which of them were direct descendants to who could have claim on the property. Is there a title? Is there a deed? Where is that? So finding and gathering that information will kind of put you a step ahead when you go to someone like the Center for Heirs Property or the Federation, because they're going to ask you those questions. So I would gather the information about your family and the property as much as you can. County clerk office is a place where you can find information about your property and the ownership and the transfer of it to see exactly where it's at. But again, the disclaimer is that I'm not a lawyer and I don't play one on TV. So please go to the website and there are the information. There's the information and the links to the organizations that are in LEAP. You can also go to the LEAP, or organization as part of DEAR and submit there, and they will help direct to. And so the website is very informational in terms of the issue of heirs property and providing the people who actually are doing the work actively right now.
Thank you. On my screen, there's two questions. One, I think you've already hit. It talks about, can you elaborate on how heirs property applies in urban areas and not just farmland? I believe you mentioned that. If you want to elaborate, you're free to do that. And the other is, how long did it take to research this issue before making the film?
Ooh, okay. Good one. Well, just to recap on an urban environment, I'll give you an example of the home across the street from me. I lived in Brooklyn. The home across the street from me was owned by Miss Lil. Miss Lil passes. She has 3 kids, and now, but she didn't have a transfer of the title or willed it to anyone. So now they all 3 have a claim to the property. And that's the key right there. When you don't have that clear title, and a lot of families do this. We're already living in the house already. The elder passes on, and the people just keep living in the house.
Right.
And until something comes and disrupts that, then everything is fine. But when you have someone that says, "Hey, are you willing to sell your portion?" and they flash some money in front of you, a lot of people will just say, "Hey, this is good. I need $10,000, $20,000," but they don't understand that once they sell, they've just put that whole property at risk for everyone. Mm-hmm. So this is it's the same sort of scenario when you're talking about acres of land or 1 acre of land or a house in Brooklyn. It's the same sort of issue. In terms of the research, how much research did I have to do?
Wait, before you go to that question, just let me add to what you said, that there are organizations that you can go to help you research title. If you are a dislocated heir, and one of them would be the what I mentioned earlier, the socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers, and that's at Alcorn University. But the other one is full of lawyers, and it's called the Mississippi Center for Justice, and they have an Heirs Property division to address this issue. And for those listening that might be from Mississippi or close by, they've got experts on this issue.
Right.
Oh, go ahead, man. How long did it take you to research the issue before you decided to make the film?
Well, when I heard about the film, prior to hearing about the film, I was in a group chat. And this was during the pandemic, when everyone was looking at ways to connect with each other. One of the gentlemen in the group chat had land in his family from like 1870s or something. And I was shocked because I was like, wait a minute, 1865 is with slavery in it. Like, how did they get like a couple hundred acres of land? Well, then I found out that some people had thousands of acres of land. So that's a whole nother part of the conversation. But when he told me that it had been in his family for that long, I was amazed because I didn't know that, Black farmers, Black landowners were stretching right outside of the ending of slavery. And so I started doing some research there, but didn't know this film was happening. I was just sort of like intrigued by this and started looking up some things. And at the time was working with a marketing agency. And after the events of 2020, the summer of 2020, and George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery, a lot of companies were trying to figure out what they wanted to do, how they wanted to show their support. And so I kept pitching the idea we should do something with Black farmers. I kept pitching and no one caught the pitch. And then later, when I spoke with my former colleague Denise Hurst Green, she mentioned this project, and I kept putting the bug in her ear. But all the while, I started doing more research on John Deere and Heirs Property and this particular thing, just wanting to know more. And when I finally got the call, I said, I already know what to do. And so in about 30 minutes, I put together the idea of which would be the film. And then we had to kind of research based on the idea that I created. And I had some help. One of the producers, Shameen, was very helpful in that. And we just sort of dug and found the people. And then this community has been, the farming community, I think in general, is one that's been kind of overlooked and dismissed. Yes. So whenever they have the opportunity to talk, they're like, hey, you need to talk to so-and-so, you need to talk. So the research started to become real easy because we kept getting names of people. Oh, you should talk to this person. You should talk to that person. You should go here. You should go there. You should look up this. And so once we kind of took a couple of steps into the world, we had people who were very warm, very open, and very welcoming, who just sort of said, hey, look, we've been waiting for someone to tell our story. We're eager to share information and people and resources and whatever you need. So I would say a couple of months of research went into it, and meeting with folks and finding out who could help tell the story before we started filming.
So you mentioned John Deere a couple of times now. Was that difficult to get John Deere to embrace a topic like this? You found it pretty easy to do that?
You know what? I've had a very unique experience with John Deere, and it's been one of ease and support. They had already started the LEAP Coalition before we thought about a film. They didn't think about a film. And in fact, they kind of had to be convinced that this was a good thing because they didn't want to seem like they were exploiting farmers in their condition to get some kind of notoriety. we spoke very candidly about why they would do this. Why would they get into this, fight? Because, it's the perception could be one way, and
Sure. Sure.
there's all kinds of backlash when companies take a stand. But if you look at the history of John Deere, their founder was an abolitionist. I know a lot of people don't know this. He was very staunch one is that. So their history is kind of imbued with someone who's trying to be on the right side of justice in history, and they were committed to this solution before the idea of a film came along. And and my colleague at Our Roker Entertainment is the one who reached out to them and said, "Hey, I think this would be a good idea." And she was motivated by the fact that her grandfather was a sharecropper.
Yes.
And she had gone to the land that he was sharecropping all the time when she was young. And this was almost kind of in honor of her grandfather, that, this story about land and land ownership and land stewardship and Black people on the land, she thought was a way to honor her grandfather. And she reached out to John Deere, the manager of the Leap Coalition, Darlin Fox, and they started talking about it. And then they said, "Hey, let's go with the documentary." And it was initially supposed to be an hour, but the stories were so rich and we got so much, we moved it to an hour and a half. And it could have been a 7-hour story.
Could have been, and it, Netflix might be watching. So look, this hour is passed by very quickly. We've got a minute and a half, 2 minutes left. One more question. It says, where can people view the film? I think you mentioned this, but please repeat. Where can people view the film and learn more about the issue? And then use that to sum up this entire interview in a minute. And then we'll
in a minute. Well, I want to mention the site again, gaininggroundthefilm.com. There's excerpts of the film, a trailer of the film, and also information like about this topic and about the how it's affecting Black farmers, and as well as the links to the organizations who are helping. The film itself we're going through the festival circuit, so we are going to be in a couple of festivals in New York, Miami, a couple other places, Philly, I believe, New Orleans. So we'll be around in the festival circuit, and then they're looking to get it on air. So it'll be available through screening festivals, or it'll be on air soon. But I would encourage people to go to gaininggroundthefilm.com, and it'll start you down the rabbit hole of Heirs Property and the people. More importantly, the people who are there to help with this issue. And to wrap in summation, I believe that connecting to the land is something that we all have a right to do, but I think more importantly, it is vital to our connecting to one another. I think when you have to get and put your hands in the dirt, and when you put your feet in the dirt, and you can understand what that feels like and how you helping fellow citizens and fellow Americans to really either sustain or uplift themselves, we all benefit from that. And I believe the giving farming and the idea of farming and land ownership and land stewardship, good press is a good thing. So we can get people back to the farm, because it is vital for our survival and for our health.
Well, I associate with everything you've said. I've never farmed myself, even though I've ended up being Secretary of Agriculture with the United States. But I take lessons from my forebears. My dad graduated from Tuskegee Institute with George Washington Carver was his teacher. And after he graduated from George Washington Carver's classes, graduated from Tuskegee, he became the first Negro county agent in the entire state of Arkansas. And when I got to be secretary, some enterprising young person went to the vault in Washington and unearthed my father's records from 1940s.
Wow.
And the same stuff I'm trying to deal with in that seat, in 1993, my father dealt with so many generations ago. Black farming discrimination, loan applications being thrown in the trash, Heirs Property issues, can't find, descendants of other original property owners. So all these things, these issues are still here with us. And the film and your work serve really to help move us all in the right direction. So thank you so much, Mr. Polk. We've heard from Mr. Eternal Polk, who has a film called Gaining Ground, and he's already told you where to find that film. He's a 2-time Emmy Nominated director and writer with over 20 years of directing short films and documentaries. Eternal, I love that first name. Congrats to you folks. Thank you so much for being with us. And this is Mike S.P., Secretary of Agriculture. Eternal, thank you so much, brother.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Everyone have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.